There we are. Okay, so I have a special guest, and we're going to talk about China. And for China, it's great to bring on Matt Ehret, so I'll add him to the stream. Hey, Matt, welcome.
Hey, Fiorella. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you for coming on. There has been a lot of talk about Xi Jinping's recent actions. There was an article that came out, Epic Times, and in that article, it basically outlined how Hu Jintao was removed from the closing session of the party, and it was in view of 2,300 delegates, and the article made it seem like Z had pushed aside all of his rivals and it is a very, totalitarian, authoritarian type of ruler. And it just made it seem like he completely has this sort of just very controlling authoritarian outlook on his government. And it pretty much blamed everything on communism and his rule, and of course went back to talking about the zero COVID policy, the lockdowns, and all of that. Obviously, Epic Times tends to lean right, and the article went on to talk about China's autocracy. So I just wanted to start off by asking you, what exactly do you make of the article in terms of what actually happened?
Well, I think, yeah, there's a certain amount of consistent narrative reframing, which is a technique that sort of came out of studies in neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, social engineering back in the 60s, and especially into the 70s out of the Esalen Institute and stuff like that, where you can use certain triggers, anchors that evoke certain emotions or felt thoughts in a target audience based upon certain images that even tap into the subconscious forces that, I mean, we all have as elements, right? So when you look at some of this, the narratives that we're seeing used in the techniques deployed to take certain shocking images or take certain like video clips, whether in Russia or whether in China, out of context and then frame it for a consumer audience and give you an infused meaning into it, it really does smell like a reawakening of the ghosts that were created during the Cold War of the 1950s, McCarthyism. It's a bit creepy in a sense, because the work being done, that was done, especially in terms of some of the internal operations to destabilize the US by Epoch Times, is not bad. I mean, their criticisms of generally a lot of the big Davos conspiratorial stuff is quite good. But then there's this consistent leaving out the causal hand of the agencies that one should understand have been at the heart of literally every single presidential assassination and undermining of the viability of the United States as a republic for 250 years. There's a complete ignoring of Anglo-American intelligence operations, the deeper, operations of empire that go back long before communism ever existed. And ultimately, when you look at what was done, and I use this example, why is it that China, as well as Russia, but China was able to kick out George Soros way back in 1989, whereas Soros is in many ways running or financing much of the transatlantic community? How did that happen? What's going on? So China has been dealing with a problem, and that problem is that the same empire, the same oligarchical structures that have been trying to strip down, destroy the nation state system and replace it with a new system of global government as part of a new system of top-down controls over the world system, as a system, have wanted to destroy both the United States and China and Russia and India equally. It's not a question of one nation, imposing or trying to undermine, Christian, democratic loving culture of the West, the way a lot of these things are posed and framed. It's really about whether or not the system of nations itself will persevere and survive, like Putin has said in his recent Valdai conference speech. We're at a fork in the road, and will we take the fork that has sovereign nation states and a multipolar system of respect and cooperation, animating international law? Will that be what we take, or will it be this other thing that involves a more dystopic slide into a dark age, effectively? And so China, yeah, I mean, they've been trying to extract this deep state operation that was built up since the 70s, especially. I mean, this goes even back into the Cold War days. David Rockefeller, Kissinger played a major role with Soros in building up an entire complex inside of the heart of China. It got really bad in the 80s, and they've been working to extract and de-weed that garden. Xi Jinping has been at war with this thing. And in some cases, like Putin has also done, he's been at war with this thing that really took over in the 90s. In some cases, they've been able to tame the beast and force some of these operatives to behave according to a national law that's in the interest of Russians or Chinese. In other cases, they've had to crack down, purge different operatives. Some cases, even jail them, as we've seen in both Russia and China. In some cases, these operatives have avoided jail, like Miles Gao, who is a big bankroller behind many war room operations conducted by a fellow named Steve Bannon. And Epoch Times, who have been able to avoid jail. How? By escaping to receive sanctuary in the arms of a CIA-controlled USA, where they've been conducting all sorts of psychological warfare operations from outside of China against their homeland ever since. So, I mean, China's got a lot to deal with. And I think that this oversimplification of what we saw with Hu Jintao being escorted out is one example of that. Certainly, I think there was a certain messaging. I believe that he's losing his marbles. I think that on a certain level, Xi and others wanted to give him perhaps a sort of dignified last experience at one of these Central Committee events. And he was obviously not up for the task. His mental decline happened much faster than I think a lot of people realized. But in the same measure, I'm open to the possibility that maybe there was a message being conveyed as well, perhaps. Hu Jintao definitely was surrounded by a lot of globalization-minded pro-Davos creeps, all of whom have been disposed of from positions of authority. You know, if you take a snapshot from 2011, when Hu Jintao was the head of the party and his immediate entourage of the Standing Committee, and compare it to today, they're all gone. So maybe there was a certain message about like how there's a new game in town. I'm open to that.
So, yeah, because from the left perspective, I've seen several instances of Z removing people, and that could also be looked on as, oh, see, when somebody is not completing their task, doing their job, China removes them. When Congress in the United States isn't doing their job, they get rewards for the people, right? They get a sort of accolade. I mean, only recently have we seen the confrontations of anti-war protesters coming after the progressives in Congress, but generally you don't get to see that sort of like accountability held in the U.S. type of government structures. Is that something that like common in China as to if somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and who controls, like, who decides what they're supposed to be doing? Is it like some sort of they follow the government and what is said on the rule of law on paper, or is it the constituents that decide? How is the balance of that in terms of what we're seeing for the Western audience that isn't familiar with China?
It's super difficult for a Western audience to get into the mindset of what this is, because it's so different from anything that our cultural experience has given us. It's there are similarities, obviously, but it's a very different experience. China's entire system is in many ways premised around, you can't say it's democratic in our conventional sense of the term democratic, but then again, you can't really say our governments are democratic either when you look at what's actually controlling the levers of power from the top of the rules-based, orderistas, from the standpoint of Wall Street, the Council on Foreign Relations, a lot of the power brokers who actually make the decisions, they're not elected. You didn't pick any of these people in the deep state. So, first of all, we got to eat some humble pie, I think, and just take a step back before we start shouting against big bad anti-democratic governments, and look what we've let grow in our own backyard. That being said, yeah, there's definitely accountability. You could see there's been over 1.5 million officials, high and low, from some municipal, some federal, some within the Chinese intelligence agencies, themselves, who have been expelled, in some cases jailed, or just completely downgraded or removed from all authority over the course of 2012 to the present under Xi Jinping's crackdown on corruption, which in some cases are very serious cases of people who were actually on the payroll of CIA front groups embedded within China. There's many, many of these cases. In other cases, it was situations where, like you said, there's constant surveys all the time. And it's very different from the Gallup polls or Pew surveys that we're often given in the West. And, they're portrayed by Associated Press and other, mainstream corporate outlets to try to just basically lie to us and tell us, oh yeah, 89% of the population believes that the unjabbed should be jailed or something or whatever. Like they just they just openly lie in many of these cases to just try to nudge social mass behavior into a certain direction in the West. Whereas in the case of China, if the population of a municipality or even a province are giving a lot of negative feedback, that the objectives that have been clearly defined for the officials who are assigned to carry out tasks, whether building certain infrastructure projects, integrating a certain region into high-speed rail that would intersect with the rest of the national lines, whatever. There's a whole variety of tasks that are constantly being examined, whether you are fulfilling, are you behind schedule, are you not, what is the population giving you as feedback. That does result in action. And we see there's hundreds of thousands of cases of officials who have been, again, like I said, either fired or downgraded because the population was not satisfied by their work consistently enough. Now, there's always a chance to, upgrade and to get back on track. They'll usually give these people many chances to reform, to do their job better. But at a certain point, there is like a dead stop where it's, either you change, you demonstrate you've improved or not. And yeah, I mean, the difference also is that it's unlike the West where we train our politicians to simply be rhetoricians in law. Most politicians like Jens Stoltenberg are just trained in university to be managers and liars, arguing without any concern for the truth. They have no real world skills. They don't know how to build anything. Whereas in China, it's known that they have the highest density of trained, qualified engineers and scientists who have done real things in the real world, working within their technical government positions in the standing committee and all throughout every level of federal, provincial, and municipal office. So there's actually an emphasis there on having knowledge of the thing you're administering, whereas we lost that aptitude decades ago. We used to have it, to be an administrator of medicine in the 50s or 60s. It was expected that you would have to be a doctor with much experience in the system. Whereas today, you could just go to managerial training, come out, and all of a sudden manage a healthcare system with no knowledge of what is the science of medicine. That's insane. That's why we're driving our ship into the into the abyss.
Yeah, and one of the things that was mentioned in the article, and I think you kind of sort of touched on it, is the way China's elections are. They kind of said, China doesn't really have a fair elections, that Xi, pushes out his rivals. How are the elections in China? As somebody that studied myself elections in the global South, elections in the United States, generally I have seen the United States have some of the worst, if not the worst, elections because of a lack of chain of custody, because there is not an oversight, because there's not really, as you just mentioned, we don't really have a say into who's elected in terms of, you could even say, regardless of the system, the corporations, the money, the political ties, etc. But in terms of like the way the elections are done, we really don't know. When we go vote in the United States, it's black box voting. So basically you vote and there's a machine, and the machine gives you a result, and people are still in line and they already name a winner. So it's kind of like, it feels like we don't have a democracy. It feels like we have the illusion of a democracy. But meanwhile, you have a lot of people who really, on the right, have begun questioning elections, right? And they're saying, the 2020 election wasn't fair. There were so many inaccuracies and so many crazy things in it, which I tend to agree with them. But then when it comes to China, they say that China isn't fair. They say that about any sort of communist, socialist type of country like Nicaragua, Venezuela, all these countries, they couldn't possibly have fair elections. How would you describe the elections in terms of how, it's described here from a Western perspective of, oh, it's just one government, everybody agrees, there's no opposition, versus like the reality?
Yeah, there's a Bible quote that goes something to the effect of, before you criticize the splinter in your neighbor's eye, be sure you take out the lumber in your own. And there's definitely a tendency to want to cast blame, and I think that goes hand in hand with the despair that people and fear that people are currently feeling with the high economic uncertainty that is pressing onto our future. A lot of people are just petrified that the world is turning inside out, and the last 2.5 years have really been a big learning experience for a lot of people, but it's been a scary thing. And when you have fear and you have economic decay, you have a tendency to have a more radicalizable population. That's always the case. It's always been that way. That's how Nazism came into being after in the wake of the hyperinflation destruction of Germany of the early 20s. That was a controlled demolition of the German economy, which foreseeably created a radicalized population that was willing to blame the Jews, blame the weak links, whatever, that were just taking your jobs, that were hurting you. And we saw where that went, how that was weaponized. So we're in a sort of situation today where there's a Chinese boogeyman story. China has a situation where there's politicking. I think there's something like 90 million members of the Chinese Communist Party, approximately. Maybe, I think a bit more than that. Once you're a member, you have certain responsibilities and certain abilities to grow in the chain of command as you see fit, as you so desire. When you get to something like the Chinese Central Committee, which made these votes, yeah, like I said, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There is politicking. It's kind of like the Vatican. I guess you could imagine it that way. That's one way to think about it. When they select a new pope, you're definitely working it. You're trying to develop alliances and what have you. So it's not that different from the experiences of the West in that sense. And just like we've seen with the case of the Vatican over the centuries at different times, that could result in very evil forces taking control and setting up cadres and conspiracies that have a very nefarious agenda. And at other times, in the case of, there's a long list of popes that died very, very mysteriously in office while they were generally doing battle with operations like the Jesuits or various Freemasonic organizations. And there's a lot of this throughout hundreds of years. At different times, you actually have good people arise who have a certain moral, philosophical character with networks and allies that they can work with, to carry out a sort of anti-Malthusian and anti-imperial orientation, which is much more becoming to true Christians. Same thing for China right now. You've got at different times in the past, China's party has been co-opted and used for destructive ends. We've seen examples of that in the case of the one China policy, which was a terrible decision, which again, a lot of the Epoch Times people, they latch onto that to try to prove, look, that's what China is today. It's the same thing we knew of during the Cultural Revolution and the one-child policy, which resulted in thousands and thousands of dead babies who were born girls. Now, yeah, that was something bad that happened. And by the way, it was done to understand how that happened. You got to look at Henry Kissinger and the Club of Rome, which are not Chinese, but rather Western operations that brought in population control mandates and demanded that if China was going to benefit at all by this new design of acquiring money in factories that Kissinger and David Rockefeller had promised in the 70s, then certain conditions would have to be met on a population control level, which involved bringing in the Club of Rome's computer modeling as part of their population growth planning projects, which is insane. But they made the decision to go with that, and they're still suffering. They're still trying to recover, even though there's no more one-child policy. That's now lifted to two, I think actually three children. Despite that, they're still trying to recover from that trauma that they did to themselves. But I think today you've got a general understanding of the nature of the beast, the nature of the enemy, and in a sense of strategic, and both tactical as well as strategic, long-term strategic pathway towards doing battle with this beast that is active within the Chinese leadership and intelligentsia. You see that by Xi Jinping's choice of those members of the standing committee that he has, ensured are working with him now, who are very much devoted to his orientation. And also, they understand that China and Russia together are, if that bond breaks, both might very well fail as civilizational states. So they're very committed to solidifying that Eurasian bond, which involves also other Eurasian countries, Iran,
Mhm.
India, and other nations of Eurasia have to work together now. And I think all the Chinese leadership right now agree with that, despite the fact that there are still people who are confused, but they're not in positions of top power anymore. So.
And speaking of Eurasia, one thing I wanted to kind of touch on geopolitically is a lot of people right now, and I understand this perspective, right, are saying that the Republican Party is the lesser of evils because you have more Republicans speaking out against funding of Ukraine, the funding to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. And then you have also Republican senators and Congress people, a few more of them, not that many, but a few, speaking out against the funding and speaking out against the war, saying we need to have some sort of restraint, while the Democratic Party and the progressives are reiterating, right, their support to Ukraine and their support to Zelensky, and are framing it like we're supporting a sovereign country from an invasion of a large country, an empire that is attacking them, which is very rich of anybody in the United States to talk about any sort of empire. But that's what we're seeing. So my thing is, while Republicans are better on Russia, given this moment in terms of the potential for nuclear war, I don't see the same thing when it comes to China, neither from the U.S. or from Canada or from most Western nations. When it comes to China, that is the boogeyman you hear mostly on the right. We need to stop China. China is very authoritarian. They don't have democracy. They have so much surveillance, that sort of thing. So, do you think that if tomorrow, let's say, by a miracle, there's a truce on Russia, Ukraine, and then the Republicans are elected in 2022 and 2024, do you think that if there is renewed tension with China, that's going to come into play on the Republican end? In other words, is China the Republicans' version of the Democrats' Russia?
Yeah, yeah, yes. I think I agree with what you just said, and it's fishy. It's really nasty what was done. Now, overall, I do very much hope that the Republicans, the better Republicans, sweep and take control of various positions of power within the House and Senate this coming month. I really do hope that, because for the immediate fires that are threatening to burn down this entire House that we're collectively stuck in right now, that's the most viable resistance that I can see from the U.S. So we got to put out that fire of nuclear war over this Ukraine thing, where we've basically turned 40 million Ukrainians into this human detonation device. It's insane. So that's good. I don't know how a lot of the Republicans tend to ignore the paradox that Putin and Xi Jinping have re-emphasized again and again their mutual bond and friendship and are doing battle together. I don't see how they're able to just psychologically lobotomize that part of their mind that would otherwise appreciate reality as it is, or see the exact same model that we've been doing with the National Endowment for Democracy and these different CIA front groups in Ukraine, in Georgia, with color revolutions, how this has also been done in the case of Hong Kong, Taiwan, or the encirclement of a whole full spectrum military missile shield around Russia's border, which a lot of Republicans see clearly. They don't like it, but they don't see how that exact same thing is encircling China and pressing on China heavily with the same doctrine, using Taiwan in the same way that they've been using Ukraine. So I think that these Republicans need to seriously get educated with a more critical thinking edge, but I do see them as more human, having access to more moral fiber that I can recognize as human and thus accessible to reason. I think that they can be educated. And I have a lot of friends amongst the Republicans who have been very anti-China, and yet who, through just simple dialogue with me and other people who are using basic common sense, have come to see how they're being played by this supranational Five Eyes agency and their psychological warfare operations, which are run not from China, but from more places like, things connected to MI6 or the CIA or other associated operations. That's the real agency causally pushing us in a bad place right now.
And in terms of the relationship between Russia and China, obviously it's clear, you said it. I mean, they have a very strong relationship. However, the United States' economy is largely intertwined with China's,
Yeah.
and you have that aspect as well. Obviously, nuclear war would destroy any notion of economies because that would just be it. But in terms of this conflict, this proxy war that the United States is waging on Russia via Ukraine, what the way it's going, right? Where we have the 101st Battalion Air Force literally on the border of Ukraine and Russia, and they're ready to deploy given any minute. And then we have the dirty bomb situation where there's so much talk about where it's coming from, who's involved. MI6 has been involved, named as well. So you have all of this going on. China has been obviously in communication with Vladimir Putin. Um, However, what China obviously has, like I said, an economic relationship with the West. How does this come into play in terms of what happens with China, in terms of a de-escalation effect that China could potentially play? Because yes, we know China, Russia, Iran, and several parts of Eurasia are obviously in alliance. But in terms of a potential world war, let's say, um, how do you see China's coming actions in relation to this threat of nuclear war?
I mean, you're dealing with a sort of type of powerful, smart, crazy when you're dealing with the thing, managing Western planning right now, especially in regards to this war drive, which I don't think is following the script that some geopolitical planners had expected should be the case today. When they were putting this script online for a new world order back in 1992, the idea was, well, the West won the world. The great game is over. And so you had these great ejaculatory celebrations by Kissinger and Bush Sr. and Biden saying how I learned to stop worrying and love the New World Order in the Washington Post. And so there was a real hubris about this end of history and just the tying up of loose ends, consolidating power, making NATO become a global force, getting rid of the nation state system, and putting into place a situation of an unelected top-down global governing caste that would then manage the diminishing returns of the system as a whole into some sort of state situation of somehow like mathematical stasis that our computer models that we've been using say is of carrying capacity of how many human beings we should permit onto the earth by 2050 or something, which is, I think the consensus is like 1 billion, that's a lot of people who have to disappear for those computer models to work. So the thing that's denied amongst all of these officials is the fact that human beings are not other animals of the jungle, and that when we make discoveries and apply them in the form of new technologies, we can create new resources. We discover new resources. We create new discoveries that allow us to sustain more people at a higher quality of life. And so we've got this interesting dance with discovery, energy, science, which has a political, economic effect such that we can have 8, 9, 10, 20 billion of our species, or at any given time. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Okay, I'm back. And other species of chimpanzees cannot. So China, Russia, currently speaking, sorry, sorry, China and Russia are currently absolutely committed to not having the death cult control their population growth potential. They're not absorbing the game or playing into the game of limits to growth, creating scarcity like we see abundantly in the transatlantic. You know, we're undermining in the West our ability to have viable energy, hydrocarbons, nuclear power, even food production, fertilizers. All of these things are consciously being destroyed to make the argument that, oh, but look, there's too many of us. We should be eating bugs or getting euthanasia pills to, you know, take care of the useless eater class. China and Russia are creating abundance top down. That is their absolute commitment. And they're not sacrificing their ancient heritage. The danger of nuclear war is a very real one because the West is so out of the reality, has slipped away from the script that they've been operating on to this extent now that a big chunk of them are tripling down with the threat of, like, you know, playing nuclear chicken with Russia and China, saying, you know, we're local, you better submit to what we want, this world government thing we all agreed on 20, 30 years ago, get back into this house before we detonate it, in a clean way. You know, we'll make it easy on you. We'll all have a nice clean diminution of our population and living standards, but you'll have you know, rewards. We'll take care of you. You'll get your wealth for at least your elite that works with us. Whereas, and if you don't, well, we can unleash nuclear hell. We're willing to do it. And I think that some of the oligarchs controlling the West are willing to do it. Other ones, who I think represent a different faction fight that we see emerging around certain tools. And Jeffrey Sachs, he is a tool. He's a Gark's tool. Look what he did in the 90s, oversee the destruction of Russia. He is not a good guy. However, he represents a saner faction of the oligarchy who are trying to change gears right now because they see that it's not in their advantage to have nuclear war burn everything that they want to control, including potentially themselves. They don't want to live in underground mansion bunkers for a few generations. They don't want to do that. So Elon Musk coming out saying eminently sane things as well. You know, Elon Musk is not his own man. I'm sorry. He's got handlers. But they're putting out sane things to say because there's an effort to try to shift gears from the crazy approach. So I think Russia and China are they have time on their side in some ways because they know that the Western system is only viable to the degree that we don't have a blowout of the banking system, which will happen. It is a foreseeable, obvious thing that's underway. That's unfortunately also creating a hectic timeline because they can only destroy Russia and China or any opposing force to their perceived hegemony as long as their system is somewhat stable enough to carry out a war. So you got this whole smorgasbord of problems. I think that Russia and China have demonstrated hypersonic missiles, a lot of capabilities that are far beyond the Western capacity to deal with. And that does change the equation quite a bit. The fact that we cannot win a first strike against both Russia or China, either or. And they do have a capability of retaliating and taking out all targets that they so wish from their Western opponents. But they have also put forth many opportunities and many policies of win-win cooperation, even for the West, if we choose to wake up and get rid of this suicide death cult that's managing us right now. We could find a lot of points of great opportunity with Eurasia building things together. So it's possible. I don't have full answers to all of those questions.
Yeah, of course. I mean, everything's developing right now as we speak.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess the last question for me is Taiwan, because again, we have seen the United States and NATO start to continue to poke and stoke the flames of war, not just with Russia, but simultaneously with China. Obviously, we've talked about the visits to by Pelosi to Taiwan, multiple other delegations from the United States, the drills, and everything that's been happening simultaneously, right? And then you add that relationship between Russia and China to that element. What is we know that the United States can't take multi-pronged, two-front proxy wars with China or Russia. But obviously, it's not just them. They have NATO on their side, they have the EU. So, what is the Taiwan situation looking like, especially now where all eyes are on Russia, Ukraine, but there is buildup happening in the Taiwan Strait, and with China trying to basically protect their yeah, you know, their what they see as their part of their country, and the United States saying yes, we respect the one China policy, but their actions showing otherwise.
Oh yeah. Well, it's good. I was actually in a discussion with somebody who's a very educated alternative media commentator and researcher who's done amazing work, and she made the point to me. She didn't know that Taiwan was still recognized was part of China. She thought it was its own country. And yeah, it's like even on the State Department, U.S. State Department currently still admits on their website that Taiwan is recognized as a part of China, albeit autonomous, but still part of China. So this whole idea that they're the same as Ukraine is not exactly the case, because Ukraine, you could make the case that it's its own viable country. It has a seat at the UN. Not the case with Taiwan. Though, just as the Ukraine went through a 2014 color revolution funded by the NED and organized by the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, I think all of the viewers must know this by now. They often miss the fact that Taiwan also had a 2014 color revolution called the Sunflower Revolution, also funded by the National Endowment for Democracy and their front groups operating within Taiwan openly, who installed the current configuration of puppet leaders in Taiwan who overthrew the Kuomintang at a time when, just like Ukraine was about to sign an economic integration agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union in 2014 and move away from the integration into the European Union. That was what Yanukovych was overthrown. That was the crime that he had committed that caused the activation of these neo-Nazi fanatics. So too did the Kuomintang, or they were in the final stages of their own economic integration agreement based upon high industrial, high technology development with China mainland. That would have been something would have massively benefited the people of Taiwan enormously. But of a lot of the younger people, the younger, 20-something-year-old millennials who are just a lot more soft-minded, they've been through a lot more social engineering in their education system in Taiwan to inflame a false sense of nationalism, which is not really, there's no viability behind this idea that Taiwan has ever been this own, ancient civilization, the way the mythology has been created for the Ukrainians. But they still have that. And a lot of them now who, again, are running positions of high office are very happy to become tools for the U.S. military-industrial complex. And it plays into, I think, some of the scary things we've seen from leading figures of the U.S. State Department and U.S. administration, reconfirming their willingness to basically defend Taiwan. Biden has said so many times that he would be willing to go to war with China if China tries to take back control of what's already theirs. You got a lot of saber rattling. And again, there's 100 million U.S. troops stationed around China's perimeter. There are war games, military exercises, biolabs in South Korea that have been doing nefarious, covert, opaque research on genetic targeted pathogens that I think are part of a new type of warfare that China is looking at very seriously, as is Russia. And missile shields in Taiwan, like the THAAD, which could easily deploy offensive nuclear warheads against China or Russia from the Pacific. So these are all things that the Chinese leadership are looking at, and none of the Western press that I could see, even in the alternative media, that tends to be very critical of the Great Reset, acknowledges the existence of any of this at all. So that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've got a lot of things going on, Matt. So I appreciate you taking the time coming on and talking to us about this. Do you have anything coming up that you want to let the audience know? Any shows, any work, any of that stuff?
Sure. Well, I always do my weekly shows on Rogue News, but I guess the thing that people could do if they want to, I've recently published a trilogy of books on the history of the origins of the deep state in North America. It's The Clash of the Two Americas, volume 1 to 3, and that's coincides with my Canadian history book series on the untold history of Canada, like you've never seen it. So that's all available on the Canadian Patriot website. Soon my wife is going to be publishing next week her first book on the origins of fascism, the occult roots of fascism going back to the 19th century, and how that really took over NATO, how that created NATO, how that took over and created the European zone. and
Wow.
also how it oversaw the murder of people like John F. Kennedy, his brother, and others. So that's going to be next week. And all this can be found on CanadianPatriot.org. That's probably it. I mean, that's a lot of work
Is
right there.
that you said it's a book that she's
Yeah, she's going
publishing?
to be publishing. It's going to be a fat book. Yeah, on the history of fascism. Yeah,
Oh, you guys should do a some sort of video podcast on it because that sounds really interesting.
yeah, it is. It's crazy. I read the manuscript. It's wild, just wild.
Okay, well,
I'll put you in touch
awesome.
with
So
her.
Matt,
Maybe you'd like to chat with her at some point about that.
oh yeah, I would love to have her on because that to me is far more interesting because we know we know NATO and we know the Nazism that has been embedded in the organization, but to go beyond that further back, that would be something I'm not familiar with. That would be something I would love to
All
chat
right,
about. So
awesome. I'll send you
yes,
her email. Cool.
please do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Ehret, thank you, Matt, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate
Bye.
it. Bye. Uh, guys, so that was very informative and a little bit on China because China, again, I still think that the right is actually the ones that are speaking out against this war more than anybody, which is sad. A lot of people got mad at the LaRouche folks now because I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but a lot of people are mad. But somebody pointed it out. I forget who it was that pointed this out. They said, if the left would have done what the LaRouche folks uh, are doing, then uh, you wouldn't have to be mad at them, right? Where's the left? Why aren't they confronting politicians like the Squad? Why aren't they confronting, Ilhan Omar, Elizabeth Warren, Ayanna Pressley, AOC? Where's the supposed left in the United States? And we've talked about this ad nauseum, so I'm not gonna go on it. But I'm just, it's this is like somebody a couple of us discussing, and it's like at this point these labels don't matter, but when you talk about to people like Matt and stuff, I can tell their ideology is of a certain degree, and we're like, yeah, but the right are the ones that are actually fighting against this war, whether for whatever reason, doubting authority, doubting what the current government, doubting the state for whatever reason, they're the ones that are leading the voices of opposition. Do I think that's going to be forever? No, that's why I brought up the China thing, because I think China is a blind spot, and China and Russia have this allyship. And of course, a lot of people um, criticize certain things that China has done in Africa, like in the Congo, where you have the lithium, right? Because China has a lot of lithium. And I meant to ask that question, forgot the lithium question, because lithium uses a lot of energy from from obviously from wherever. Mostly they get it cobalt from the Congo, lithium from Bolivia and Chile, and of course the populations that live there get exploited by those that are trying to get this. Now, China is obviously way more advanced when it comes to green energy. Europe is supposed to go there by 2035. The reason I'm talking about this is because I just did a package on it. You guys will see it. But um, the EU is going to basically, in their effort to do this green energy stuff, they're going to use so much more lithium and cobalt, which is literally from the global south. They have to get it and they literally exploit it. And child labor is often used specifically in the Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Elon Musk, Intel, and Apple have all come under accusations for using child labor. Of course, nobody talks about this sort of thing. And of course, China is a participant in terms of the lithium industry and other industries. So I meant to ask that question, but I forgot. But that's something to be looking at. Obviously, people say the relationships have been different, but it's always something to watch over. I mean, like a lot of us don't really hear that much about China. China has their own media. Here we at RT we interview people that are talking about China's government, but China has their own media, so it's kind of we get way more of it than you guys do back home. So shifting on over to the situation here, Steve, We're gonna go to section, the first one, Ilhan Omar, because Ilhan Omar was exposed as a NATO shill and as a supporter of Nazis by these anti-war protesters. I don't know uh, if they were LaRouche related. I don't care. Uh, I know that they weren't the same people that went after AOC last time. I know they were different people. So if we just click on the first tweet, and we'll just do that. There's only two tweets, um, so this is the video, and I want you guys to hear this video, and then we'll talk about it. I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself so you can play it.
You are supposed to be a progressive Democrat, anti-war. Anti-war. 80 billion to Ukraine is not anti-war.
We are helping Ukraine defend themselves.
Ukraine is killing its own citizens.
Helping people
in the Donbass.
War. We are helping little children like me that have been held. So listen, unless you have not been paying attention to what is happening, there are millions of Ukrainians that have been displaced. There are piles of bodies that are being found in mass graves. There are little children whose lives are being lost.
By Zelensky!
Here.
Yeah, by Zelensky in the Donbass.
But unless you are someone like me that has been that child, you do not get to tell me what my votes mean and how I get to vote in supporting people who desperately need
Okay, so it's funny. I was laughing. I saw that somebody put a picture of Claire and Ilhan Omar next to each other. So a couple of points on that, right?
You are supposed.
She's using her identity and her background, which, by the way, literally Biden invaded Somalia. Like, literally, we have military troops in Somalia right now. So, and she's quite fine with that. So she's using her identity and all of that to pretty much turn it around and make this about the poor children in Ukraine, but only the poor children that NATO has defined are the children that are dying, which, by the way, the vast majority of people dying that are civilians are being shelled by Ukraine themselves. And you can ask a countless array of journalists that have gone on the ground. Most of them we've had on the show and are our friends. Eva. We have even Wyatt went to observe Donbass. He had an experience there. Vanessa went to observe the elections. They've seen this. Patrick Lancaster has been reporting in the region for years. I think it's like 9 years or something ridiculous. He's been reporting there for a long time. Then you have just a bunch of people that are independent journalists that have been on the ground, just showing everybody that's right. But of course, Ilhan Omar takes that because that's what gets put out there. The Russians are doing these mass graves. The Russians are doing that, all of that. It's kind of crazy to me to hear, not her saying this, but just see the response. And I don't know if these people are all like trolls or if they're bots or whatever, but to see how many people support her just blindly is crazy to me because there's all this information that's out there. It's readily available. And I know the propaganda is strong, but I mean, this is a politician and your tax dollars are going to fund this war, fund these fascists, billions and billions of dollars. The United States isn't doing well economically. And then you have Ilhan Omar lying and basically making it about, her story, weaponizing this whole thing to talk about children. And I think it's disgusting when you weaponize children and the death of children to prove a political point, because at that point, you're literally just manipulating your audience. You're being disingenuous. She leaves out, and I don't think she doesn't know, because the argument is, does she know? Is she this stupid that she doesn't know about what really happened, the history, right? Because whether you like Russia or not, the the history of the Maidan revolution and the coup that happened during that time, that's something you can't leave out when you're discussing this whole thing. You just can't. You can say everything you want, but you can't leave that out. And does she know? Or is she that stupid? I think she knows. I think she shifted her stance. I think somebody had posted how she was talking against nuclear war, also how Rokana had talked about the fascists in Ukraine, all the way until we actually started this conflict. And then their whole rhetoric changed. So I think she knows. I think these people are there because they are going to act this way. If they were in any way in opposition, they wouldn't be there. So I think at this point, anybody entertaining the fact that the squad or Bernard or anybody is in some sort of like is it can be in any way pushed is it's not only boring to me, it's freaking I mean my like retarded. It's mentally you're mentally incapacitated by by trying to play theatrics when it comes to your elections because these elections don't matter. I'm sorry, they don't. You're not going to elect more people into the Democratic Party. I think I saw somebody, was it the Hill Rising? Was it Brianna Joy Gray saying that or something? Or making like Bernie memes at this point. It's 2022. We've gone through a pandemic, ridiculous elections, a pandemic. We've gone through this conflict. We've been completely just torn apart, psychologically just experimented on, health wise experimented on. We've gone the amount of things that have happened in the last 2 years is enough to have happened in a decade. I mean, everything has just gone insane, right? And we're at a time where we don't have the capacity for a lot of people to deal with reality because reality is really shitty right now. Like I said yesterday in the stream, we're on the verge of nuclear war. We could literally be on the verge of nuclear war. And this is something that I'm saying. It's something that our guest just was talking about, something a lot of us have agreed on. I'm not an alarmist. I'm literally like the opposite of an alarmist. I'm like, oh no, everything will be fine. It's chill. No, like this is not the time for that. And when you have people now popping up, right, in these different places, and they're going to a lawmaker, and they're saying, "Hey, you did this. You need to stop funding war." And she responds in the way she responds. I mean, there's no voting your way out of that. These people don't feel like they owe you shit. They don't care. She's happy she's funding fascists because that's what she was told to do, and she's going to continue doing it because the money's good. Now, I want to read her response on Twitter because everybody called her out, everybody and their mother, and she responded and made it even worse. And in spite of all the trolls and stuff, I think that a lot of people are finally seeing through. So she said, I am sorry. You all are anti war protesters. You are dangerous propagandists who are literally making a mockery of the anti war movement. I have never had the pleasure of responding to Russian ridiculous internet disinformation in person before. Thank you for the opportunity. So, she hit every single talking point, right? And then she said, I am amazed at the nerve that some people have to not be upset with the country literally waging war, but at the country defending itself and those helping them do that. I was even told by one of these people tonight, it's America that started the Russia war. Seriously? WTF? Like, I can't with her. I can't. Like she thinks it's a joke that it's America that started the war. Like she thinks it's a joke. Like this is a fact. I mean, this is a fact. I I don't know what to tell you. I mean, there's the tweet, right? Like we're talking about actual fascists. We're talking about Ilhan Omar, right? Who talks about same as AOC, same as Rashida, same as Pramila, same as all these people. They constantly focus on right wingers in Congress. January 6th, they had their whole theatrics, right? The coup, they had this whole thing going on. Literally, when there's actual proven paramilitary fascists, don't take it from me, take it from the Washington Post, the New York Times, Reuters, everybody who reported on this pre-February of 2022, take it from them. And then she's saying that's Russian propaganda. Literally, I could take that her comment, copy paste it, and it's literally every other comment I get whenever I post anything. Literally, it's just, haha, Russia state affiliated media. Nothing I say matters. Like it's that. So it's, to me, this is not just a dumb congresswoman. This isn't just, she's in it for the money. This is like actual intelligence, military apparatus at work here. Why? Because she is going after fair criticism, smearing the criticism and the critics, okay? And she's using the same talking points that an intelligence operative would. And she's doing it like so seamlessly. And so is AOC. They both did it. So if you think that this is coincidence, that they don't have these talking points worked out, guys, I mean, this is their job, is to be PR influencers, propagandists for these for the state, for the State Department. That's all their job is. There's zero lawmaking, this and that. There's all of that that was maybe with a Cynthia McKinney, gone. And Cynthia McKinney said as much when I interviewed her. She said everybody that's an actual threat has been pushed out. She's like, this is COINTELPRO, and the squad are this. And she said that like over a year ago or two. Like this is the reality. So anybody thinking, well, I think she has good intentions and all of this, has to look at her background, who she worked with before she was a bartender. Um, yeah. So it I just regarding that, I have to give my hat out to the people doing something, because I've been saying that the American people are the ones that can stop this war. And the reason I say that is because you're in the belly of the beast, you're in the empire. If I were back home right now, I would be trying to get some sort of anti-war protest on, because like I don't understand why that's not happening. I mean, I understand why that's not happening in the United States, but I don't understand like what it's going to take beside people being directly bombed or being directly affected. And then by that point, um, it might be too late. It would be too late. And I stand by my statements that I think it's privileged to equate these two things, right? You don't have to like Russia. Nobody's saying Vladimir Putin is an angel. Nobody's saying that Russia has never done anything wrong, that Russia is free of corruption. Literally, nobody's saying any of these things. Nobody's saying that they want nuclear war, at least on this show, and Pasta, in terms of us, and in terms of, I think, the majority of people that we associate with. None of us have said, hey, yeah, let's nuke everybody out, Team Russia. Like, that's not what is being said. What is being said is that there's a clear enemy right now. And I think that enemy it is NATO and the United States. Now, do I think that there won't potentially be another one pop up, that, that other countries are fully, uncorruptible? No, I don't think that. But I think that for the longest time, and if you listen to what Putin has said, and what other leaders have said, leaders that you're not allowed to hear, by the way, because I would be more convinced about NATO and the US are equal to Russia if Russia hadn't lost millions and millions of people fighting Nazis, and then the US would go to protect them and put them in positions of power years later. I would probably be more keen on believing that there's some sort of equity there, but there's not. And you don't have to like any state, and you can hate every form of government, every state, and you can be fine with that. But that doesn't mean the reality is any different than what it is. And the reality right now shows us that there's a clear enemy that's stoking the flames of nuclear war, that has literally troops on the border ready to deploy and attack, American troops ready to deploy and attack Russia. And the moment they do that, Russia will respond not with nukes. They're not going to respond with nukes, but they're going to respond with militarily. And that's what they've said as much. I don't know how many times I have to say this. Literally, Russia has never said we are going to use nuclear weapons. In fact, at every single turn, they have been asking for de-escalation. It's just the one country that has used nuclear weapons on everybody paints everybody else as the ones likely to use nuclear weapons, which is extremely dangerous because we've seen false flags. We know this is part of the military strategy. We know this is a CIA tactic. We know this is an intelligence tactic. This happens all the time. So that is what's scary, is that you and I, even if you are an American constituent that's at home right now, you can't control what these psychopaths do, but you can literally disturb the current situation. Bolivia is was protesting over the something that happened against the current president Luis Arce, and they literally just took hold of the means of production. They stopped this plant and they disrupted the whole entire ecosystem by doing this. And what are we doing? What exactly are the American people doing to stop this? Because I think at some point, I'm not one to blame the American people, but a lot of people that I know do. Like in terms of anti-imperialist people that travel, they do because they say, "Why are you allow yourself to be this brainwashed? Why don't people just?" They do in some way hold some sort of accountability to what's going on. And I say, people are generally, I mean, most people, I have friends that aren't political at all, right? And we talk about things and they know sort of what's going on, but they don't really know. And they're going about their lives. They're going to work. They're planning their vacation. They're doing things. They're having their birthdays and their celebrations, and they really don't know what how bad this is. And on the other side of that, a lot of people don't want to know how bad this is because since the pandemic, right, everybody wanted to go back to normal. But now they've realized that maybe things were never normal. Maybe the life that they were living wasn't necessarily something that was as fulfilling as they thought. And that's why you see also like the decay of culture and the decay of so many things, creativity. And it's just a very dire time for the West. Meanwhile, down here in Moscow, yeah, people are, always looking to see, hey, what's going on? There's a lot of tension in the news, but people are living their life. People are just the same. They're going out, they're going to restaurants, and the economy is doing way better than you would expect with all the sanctions and everything else. And so uh this sort of thing, this sort of nuclear war, I don't think we've been faced with in the way we're facing it now. And I applaud the young people, the protesters, anybody that's out there just yelling at these politicians because sure, you're not going to like push them to do anything necessarily, but I think you're starting to disrupt and you're starting to put perhaps fear and perhaps this sort of break-in into Pelosi's house and this attack on Paul Pelosi and a lot of the crime that's going on signals a disdain for the status quo. And it may take that sort of what people call anarchy, which isn't really anarchy, but what they call anarchy, this chaotic situation where there is so much unrest. That is a signal of what's to come. And like I said, I don't think we're going to see a difference in anything until people are directly affected. So, yeah, and the last thing, guys, I just want to touch on is Elon Musk because, I've been a harsh critic of Elon Musk. I don't trust him. He's actually making deals to use his technology in the intervention in Iran, by the way, just in case you didn't know that. He's going to be used for Iran. He's owned, as Matt said, he is not his own man. He has handlers, okay? He's got handlers. He's got government subsidies, but he tweeted today, the bird is freed. And although he said that there will be a meeting and they will decide which accounts are going to come back or not, some accounts have already come back. The Babylon Bee came back. I know Scott Ritter has returned to Twitter. Other people have come back. So there's a few accounts that have come back. I still see the same amount of NAFO trolls. They're still there. Trust me, I know. They literally live in my mentions. And I'm still shadow banned. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but I'm shadow banned, and so is Rachel, and so is anybody with the Russia state affiliated media. So I said, take off Russia state affiliated media and their shadow banned accounts and unban Russian media if you're remotely serious. Otherwise, this is just talk. And I genuinely stand by that, because if Twitter is going to be a free speech platform, and if Musk is serious about it, and I'm not holding my hopes up, then I mean, you can't ban media from other countries, or not even countries, but oppositional narratives, just an opposing narrative, right? You have the Western narrative, you have the Eastern Russian narrative. If you're serious about free speech, you would work to do that. At the very least, remove the shadow ban, because I don't care. At some point, I mean, whatever, you can label me all you want, but there's a clear shadow ban, and this is Margarita Simoyan, the editor-in-chief of RT, and she said, Elon, since you're all for free speech, maybe unban RT and Sputnik accounts and take the shadow ban offline as well. This is like, guys, when I tell you, I've stopped posting videos on my account directly. Why? Because if I post a video, and Wyatt Reed was talking to me about this not long ago, we can post a video, and normally our videos will get like, even if it's a shitty video or whatever, it doesn't get views, like a couple thousand, right? You post a video now, you're lucky if you get like 200 views, and it'll have more likes than views, which makes no sense, because even if you just click on a video, it counts as a view. So what they do is they send you to this massive abyss of a black hole where nobody sees your videos, less people see your tweets, and the only way to get around that is to go use another account. And that's what a lot of people did. They have been doing this for a while. They did it to Camila Escalante when they were sanctioning Venezuela, so they did it to her. And Rachel said it as well. She said, when you have over 34,000 followers, but it's a Christmas miracle if your video hits 500 views, Elon Musk, for the love of this platform, released a journalist from the shadow ban. And so she quote tweeted her video, and now her video has way more. Well, I wasn't going to play the video. You're good. But she quote tweeted her video, and her video has way more views than it did before. And so these are the weird things we have to do. And especially if you're a content creator like Rachel, and everybody else that's a content creator, or a journalist, and is putting your stuff out there, it's really shitty to you see it and you think you're going crazy because you can't prove it. You can't prove it. You're like it, but it's obvious. And so it would, if Elon Musk were serious about that, he would just make it, everybody gets.
You somehow muted yourself again, Fee. Not real sure.
But it did it itself. Okay. So I'm saying a bunch of people have hopes in him. I'll give him the fact that a few accounts have come back, but I don't really think this is going to be much different than it was before. Why? Because I think Twitter doesn't belong to Elon Musk, and I don't think Elon Musk belongs to Elon Musk. Elon Musk belongs to somebody else. So sure, we can all hope and dream, but I just don't see it really happening. And I'm not against people, tweeting at him. I tweeted at him. I think everybody should, to show that sort of like have that tracking, right? Where you're said, oh, Elon, we asked you to do this, you're not doing it. We'll see what happens. And I think too many people have too much faith in this guy, but if he's going to do something, I'd love to see it, man. I really would, but I'm just not holding my hopes up for that. So yeah, that's that. And I do have to point out, he did fire Vijaya Gadde, the woman who made the call to suspend Donald Trump permanently. He also fired a few other people, like a bunch of people, and he's bringing in new people. The person he fired, one of the people he fired got left with like millions of dollars, and they'll be fine. So it's not like it's anything bad for some of these people. But what's been interesting is seeing the meltdown by liberals, right? I'm dead inside. I can't believe this. I'm leaving Twitter. Oh my God, Elon Musk is taking over. I'm done. Like, it's literally, yeah, he's a billionaire, but literally so is everybody else that is in charge of that company. So what are we talking about here? It's so dumb, but they're clutching their pearls, and it's been really fun watching them cry about it, because it's just, to me, it's just really, it doesn't make a difference. We still carry that scarlet letter of being Russian state media. And also it just, anybody that sees that automatically just, it's annoying. I'm not mad about people saying that, like calling me a propagandist. It's just annoying seeing it all the time. Like, can you guys think of something else? Like, it's just super, super annoying all the time. And yeah, Twitter Chief Executive Officer Parag Agrawal is among the executives who literally was fired. And yeah, so that's one of the guys where they were on the meme. They were making memes about him. I got fired. I think there's a parody account of this person on Twitter. But yeah, this is part of the whole scenario that happened, right? I don't have any sort of faith that Elon is gonna save anybody, but if he wants to try, if you guys think he will, we'll see. I'll admit I'm wrong. Like, if he actually does something, I will fully say thank you, Elon, and good job, but not holding my breath. Anyway, so guys, that's it for today. I wanted to do a way shorter show than this, but turns out it's hard for us to have a short show. I want to check if there are super rays, Steve. I don't know if you have it pulled up, but if not, I will pull it up real quick.